everyone. Good morning. I'd like to talk to you about calm technology. But first, who's seen this quote that 50 billion devices will be online by 2020? A few of you. Okay, so every time I see a quote like this, first I think, what the heck has happened? We have more devices than we have humans at some point. And every time I think about there's all these futurists out there and they say, if we just apply more technology, everything will be better. And at some point with enough technology, we'll have a utopian society in which everything will take care of us and everything will be automated. And I like to ask whether that actually sounds good or not, and then consider how good our reality is right now. Like the smart watch that automatically sends you the same notifications that you have on your phone, or the smart fridge. There are so many companies that have tried to get me to help them design a smart fridge, and they've said things like, we'll have a payment plan where you can sign up and every family member can have a certain payment plan that restricts certain foods from your diet. And I like to ask, well, what is that? Like, you have a smart fridge, but you're storing all of the sweets in the cupboard, and I have a dumb cupboard with all the sweets in it. If I'm restricted from eating what's in my fridge, where I store all the healthy things, because it doesn't let me in, then won't I just go to the cupboard? This doesn't make a lot of sense. Or the idea that you have to have a fingerprint to get into your fridge, but when you're cooking, your hands are dirty, so then suddenly you get stuck and locked out of your fridge, you have to clean your hands. Or if it's connected to a server, then your fridge gets hacked and starts to DDoS attack some sort of website or the DNS layer of the web. When you put all of these different technologies together with different development cycles, different lifetimes, different alerts, you get what I like to call the dystopian kitchen of the future, in which everything is shouting at you all of the time, and you really don't have, what are we optimizing for? Aren't we optimizing for a little bit more human time, having some freedom, having less quiet devices? When in reality, we keep thinking that technology should be more like this. How many of you go to sleep next to your phone? How many of you wake up next to your phone? How many of you look at your phone the first thing in the morning, even before your significant other? How many of you are kind of annoyed about how many alerts you get on your phone and wish that you didn't have to click on your phone and get those alerts and then get stuck in 30 minutes of looking at all of your emails and getting attacked? Okay, great. So we have some issues when we try to put technology into everything. For instance, there was this startup called PetNet, it still exists, and the advertisement on the website was that you don't have to worry about feeding your pets anymore when you're gone, because not only does this pet feeder feed your pets automatically, but it also allows you to Skype your animals so you can hang out with them when you're gone. So a lot of people bought this and they thought it was great. But you can kind of expect what happens next because it was connected to a server. The server went down for a couple days, and because people expected that they could have their animals be fed and watered without them, this kind of happened. You kind of had a new Schrodinger's cat, where you didn't know whether your cat was alive or dead, or where it was, whether it was okay. And when I looked at this, I said, wait a second. When escalators break, they turn back into stairs, right? Like, they're still slightly functional. And when this breaks, shouldn't it automatically default to just having your water and food on a schedule without the need for internet access? Well, it turned out that they hadn't implemented that feature, the feature of offline feeding, the feature that was the core thing for their web-connected application. And then I looked at the terms of service and I said, aren't they liable if a dog or cat dies? And I looked at the terms of service and it said, no, we're not liable for any service failures that happen with our servers. Now, this is an example where I don't think any pets died because people had backup systems where they had friends with keys that could go into their house. But when we start to rely as humans on these technologies, as if we were relying on electricity, we have to remember that the web is not as guaranteed or as stable or as bandwidth friendly as electricity. The whole point of electricity is it's there all the time, it's kind of invisible, it's there when you need it, not when you don't. And when you start having things that are connected to servers all the time, you can't guarantee that it's always going to be okay. And so we have to design within that constraint and say, when something fails, how does it fail, and how well does it fail, and how can we guarantee that when something fails, you still have some sort of functionality in it. And also on your website, don't say, never worry about feeding your pets again when you're away, if you know that at some point the server will fail and you'll have some downtime. So we have this era of interruptive technology. It's not just interrupting us by making all of these notifications happen on our phones and distracting us from important moments, but we also have service failures all the time and a lot of hacking that's going to increase over time. And so the opposite of that, when I was writing my thesis on mobile phones, I found this term called calm technology. And I said, where did this term come from? And it turns out that it came from Xerox PARC in the 80s and 90s. So what happened was these two people, Mark Weiser and John Seeley Brown, created a future at this research lab of pads, tabs, and boards that were all connected. And they created like these little badges you could wear around your neck that could tell where you were in the company. You could walk in and it could turn on your computer in the background. A lot of this connected things. They were considered like the fathers of ubiquitous technology, which we kind of now know as the Internet of Things. But they were really early, and so the papers they wrote and what they discovered is kind of locked away in the past. And so when I found these papers, and what they wrote about was that we're going from an era where there were many people to one computer, to a few people to a few computers with the desktop era. Then we have some mobile phones where there's a few devices to people, and then an era in which technology outnumbers us on the individual level. And what they found out is that the scarce resource in the 21st century would not be technology. Technology would be really, really cheap. Each of the technologies they were working with at Xerox PARC was like $40,000, $50,000 each. But they knew that it would become cheap enough that we'd be able to have it. And they said the scarce resource would be our attention, and how we design our technology to work with our attention, to allow us to be more human instead of put us on pause, that would be the most important thing that we could do, and the biggest constraint we would have in the future. Our own bandwidth as humans to understand what was going on and stop getting interrupted. Maybe have a little bit more reflective time. So let's talk about designing calm technology. How can we actually design this? They outlined a number of different principles, and then I added a few more that kind of have to do with what we're dealing with right now. The first is that technology shouldn't require all of our attention, just some of it, and only when necessary. And the analog example they gave for this was just a tea kettle. A tea kettle is pretty straightforward. You set it, you forget it, it calls to you when it's ready. And you can go into another room, you don't have to wait. It isn't internet connected, so you don't have to get a notification on your phone. It just uses its own control to tell you that it's done. Or if it's an electric kettle, you have different notification sounds. Technology should empower the periphery. We have all of this high-resolution attention right in front of us. Like when we're driving a car or riding a bicycle, we have very high-resolution attention, and then we have our peripheral attention over here. It's lower resolution, but we can still understand what's going on without distracting us from our primary focus. And then around the back of our head or on our skin, we have the haptic capability to understand touch, and we also have the ability to understand sounds. So how can you take alerts that would normally use the visual channel, normally designed for the world of the desktop, and how can you compress that information into other senses to still give people the same amount of information or the least amount of information possible to get their job done without distracting them all of the time? Not all of our alerts need to be text that jar us out of our primary task. We can use all of these other senses instead of just using that in front of us. One of the papers that Mark Weiser and John Seeley Brown wrote was called "The World is Not a Desktop." They said, we can't just keep designing technology as if we have a bunch of network connection in front of us and we're sitting down, we have all of the attention. Instead, we need to be designing technology that works when you're downloading an app in the shopping market line and you need to download the app before you get to the shopping market line, or you can't complete your order. Or in this case, the badge line, you should be able to get a notification that your badge is ready because you're at this location, and you should be able to have that come up instead of searching through your email. There's a lot of things that we can do to give ourselves information based on context that's not being done right now. This is a silly application, but this is the Lumo Smart Posture Sensor, and what this does is it detects if you're slouching. I can see some of you straightening your backs, but it detects if you're slouching, and then it just gives you a tiny little buzz and then helps you to remember that you're slouching so that you can sit straight up. That's very good posture, by the way. So you could call this like little brother technology or something like that, where it's helping you instead of like big brother technology. But the idea behind this is that it's using a personal notification. Every once in a while you hear somebody in your office get like an alert on their email, and it's really annoying because they never turn it off. I had an employee who had an insulin pump installed, and he was really excited to have this insulin pump. And then we had a meeting and I heard it beeping so that you could refill the insulin. And I said, you're beeping. How does that work? And he said, well, when I'm at a wedding or a funeral or a film, I'm beeping, and it's bothering other people. And then when I'm at a crowded club, I can't hear it. And I said, can you change the notification style? And he said, no, I can't change the alert. I can't change it to just buzz. So he's missing the information when he needs it, and he can't control the perception of other people around him. They think that he just has a phone that hasn't been turned off. And so he's really upset because he got this invasive surgery to get this 24-hour insulin pump installed, but he couldn't change the notification. You can't predict what context people will use your application in or your technology in. So the best thing you can do is allow them to change something so that they can adapt it to their environment. Technology should inform and calm. This is my old kitchen. And one of the things that we did is took a Hue light bulb and attached it to a weather report. So it would change the color based on what the environment would be that day. And this was in Portland, Oregon, where it's basically the same weather as here. It's mostly rainy and overcast. And so if it was blue, it'd be rainy. If it was every once in a while, it would be yellow or red if it was going to be sunny or sunny and hot. And instead of having those dystopian, futuristic videos of somebody waking up in the morning in their perfect condo in San Francisco where the technology can always understand their voice the first time, which is impossible, you can just walk in and through kind of ambient awareness, understand what the weather is going to be. And then, of course, you can look on the iPad to see more information. But the idea is how much can you compress into a very small indicator that gives you an idea of what something is going to be, without just waking you up with a computerized voice and trying to jar you into understanding something. Nobody wants a computerized voice waking them up in the morning, especially if somebody's sleeping next to them. It doesn't make a lot of sense. So how can we change that notification into a different sense? Technology should amplify the best of tech and the best of humanity. Every time we try to make an automated phone tree that sounds like a human, that responds to our human voice, we end up putting humans on pause. You end up having to say something a lot of times into that voice-activated message system, and it becomes really, really annoying. What humans are really good at is being embodied. They understand context. We understand how to curate. We understand what's applicable to a specific problem. And what machines are really good at is diving through lots and lots of data and giving us some results that we can then choose from. It's not about a world in which everything is automated for us and everything is decided for us. That's a horrible world in which everything will go wrong and we'll be stuck in an automated parking garage and not be able to get out with no customer service phone number to call and get ourselves unstuck. Instead, it will be more about, hopefully, more about humans working alongside technology, the technology doing some of the work and the humans doing the rest of the work, but you can kind of have a blend of each. Google's really good at doing this because it doesn't give you one result, it gives you many results based on what it thinks you might be interested in, based on your keywords, and then you can make the executive choice about what is actually applicable to you. This is really important, or you get stuck with the one result or a decision made for you, which is almost always incorrect. And if it's really correct, then it's really scary. Like if Amazon figures out exactly what you want and follows you around the web with all of these advertisements the whole time, it's really creepy. I don't really like that at all. I'd like it to be kind of incorrect every once in a while. This is my friend Todd Huffman, and he made a robot that just scans all of these tissues in 3D. So you can take a tissue and it will use a diamond knife to both scan the tissue and put it into a database. And this does this 1,500 times faster than a human could do. There are some things we just don't want to do as a human. And those are the things that should be automated, and then we should be able to make executive decisions based on that data to help people understand whether this is a precancerous tumor, for instance. That's something that somebody with a PhD doesn't want to do in a lab. It hurts their hands, it hurts their eyes, but this is something that a robot should be doing, but yet we need to be able to interpret the data or connect the data to each other. Technology can communicate, but it doesn't need to speak. How many of you are really annoyed with those robotic voices that try to sound really human? Okay, so we see these a lot in films, and films have lied to us. That's not how these things work. In a film, you have 50 takes for an actor to get something right. And in the real world, if you try to tell a computer something, most of the time you'll have to say it a couple times in a row, or really enunciate, or use an American accent to do it, because that's who programmed it. So for an example, this is the Roomba, and the Roomba, instead of saying, "I'm done cleaning," it goes da-da-da-da, and it's really happy. There's emotion in that. It's just a tone but it's dun da da da, and then when it's stuck, it goes dun dun. And you're like, oh no, I need to help the Roomba, and then you help it out. And because of that, because you're helping the technology, it's not scary, it's not terrifying, you're helping it. It has some limitations. And people invite these things into their homes, and cats ride around on them on YouTube because it's cute. And it's also just the shape to do the job. Actually, it doesn't really do a great job. It never gets the corners clean, yet people still like it. Eventually there should be a model that cleans the corners. But the notification style is fantastic because it just gives you a tone. It's telling you whether it's done or not, and it has a backup light to tell you that. That's more effective computing. Technology should consider social norms. Oftentimes we see technology released that is a little bit too advanced for us. It's not that technology isn't ready for us. It's that humans are usually not ready for technology. Think of how long it took to go from the landline telephone to the cordless phone to the mobile phone and then to the mobile phone with a camera. Whatever that takes, it takes a while and then that becomes the norm. So if we look at what's normal right now, all of you have video cameras in your pockets. And that's not a big deal. It's invisible. But when the phone with a camera first came out, people were terrified. There were all of these articles that said, our privacy is dead, everybody will take pictures of each other, and now we know we use our cameras to take pictures of our food to put on Instagram. We don't really use it to take pictures of people to invade their privacy as they walk down the street. But it took us a while, a couple of years, to learn that this is the gesture when you click and you take a photo. And that became absorbed into how we experience technology. So if you try to make something that's too enhancing, too above the norm, it becomes scary. Anything that restores you to that given norm, in this case a phone with a camera is the norm, so most people have to have it. Anything restorative is kind of like a prosthetic leg or glasses can be considered completely accepted and even decorative. It's totally okay to wear glasses, it's not terrifying. But anything above the norm that hasn't been equally distributed yet becomes terrible and fear-inducing. The problem with the Google Glass is that 15 features were released at the same time. It was too expensive. It was very difficult to play with, unlike the iPhone, where one of the earliest apps was the fart app, where you would click a button and make a fart noise. That application was incredibly useful because it told the story of how to make an app, how to use the audio library, how to use the touch library, and how to make something with 10 lines of code that you could then share on the web. But the first app, because there were too many features in Google Glass, was blink your eye and then it will take a photo. It was terrifying. So people have to think about what's the current norm and how does your technology fit into that norm? And if it doesn't fit, then spend 5 or 6 years, tiny little feature at a time to get people, to get that absorbed into our reality. The right amount of tech is the minimum to solve the problem. These are boring. These are things that we are used to every single day. This is just a light notification on both sides. The toilet occupied sign in the bathroom and the street lights, they're universal. We don't have to translate them into a bunch of different languages. And they're boring, they're dissolved. I would like to see more technology like this, boring technology that everybody uses. If we were to design street lights today as if we were designing applications, you'd have to Bluetooth your phone to the car and then Bluetooth it to the street lights, and then it would be horrible. But this is just something that works on its own, and it's pretty good, and it's programmable. Technology should make use of the near and the far. If you were to turn your phone on airplane mode right now, what could you use? Could you actually do much of anything? I mean, you could take some notes and set an alarm. And then if you think about when you used to have a desktop computer, you could do anything on that desktop computer without the web, because a lot of them didn't have web access. And so if you look at this kind of curve over time, we had computers that were far away from us, and then we had computers and our data was close to us, and now we have a kind of remote mainframe world where we're time sharing on external computers whose data we really can't access. So what I'd like to see is it come back down where the data that's sensitive, that's personal, gets stored with us, close to us. And then we can share that data for 24 hours or so with somebody that needs that information. And then that way, all the data is stored with us. And if there's a server breach, because these data lakes are really exciting to hackers, then they're only getting what's shared for the last 24 hours instead of all of the data over time. So if you process as much on the device itself, you can give people a lot more quality access instead of waiting for them to download data through a really slow cell network that will become even slower unless we upgrade those basic infrastructure of the web. So if good design allows people to accomplish their goals in the least amount of moves, then calm technology does the same thing, but with the least amount of mental cost. And that's the scarce resource that we'll have in the future, that we already have. A person's primary task, you shouldn't be computing all the time, you should be being human. We don't want to automate hanging out with friends, looking at a sunset, and going on vacation. And the scarce resource is our own attention, and will always be from here on out. So how we make use of tech becomes the most important thing, and that design becomes incredibly important, or people will stop buying the product. I wrote a book called Calm Technology. It goes through how to build this stuff with a bunch of research. And then there's also a website that has a lot of the research papers from Mark Weiser and John Seeley Brown. They're really, really well written and engaging, and I love reading them, and they're very refreshing to get information from a time period in which we didn't have all these devices, but they were predicting the rise of these devices. So thank you so much.